We often define strength by how much we can handle, how long we can endure, and how well we can keep going despite the pressure. From a young age, we're taught to keep pushing, to toughen up, to be resilient in the face of difficulty. We equate strength with self-reliance. We think the strongest people are the ones who don't ask for help, who don't cry, who never show signs of weakness, and so we grind. We push harder. We tell ourselves, if I just try a little more, if I just get through this next thing, I'll be okay. But somewhere along the way, that kind of strength begins to wear thin. You wake up tired. You feel the weight of decisions, expectations, demands. You keep going, but you're running on empty. You tell yourself it's just a phase, that you need more coffee, more discipline, more control. But inside, you know you're stretched too far. The pressure isn't building strength anymore, it's cracking something within. And yet we hesitate to let go, because letting go feels like failure. We believe if we stop pushing, we'll fall apart. We're afraid that if we stop trying, everything will collapse. But here's the truth that contradicts everything the world teaches. True strength begins when we surrender, not when we strive. Real strength isn't about how tightly you can hold on. It's about knowing when to open your hands. It's the courage to say, I can't do this on my own. It's the clarity to recognize that you weren't made to carry every burden by yourself. Surrender is not giving up. It's not apathy. It's not weakness. It's choosing a different source of strength. It's admitting that your efforts alone aren't enough, and they were never meant to be. There is a Spirit, the Holy Spirit, that is present and ready to step in the moment you step back, not to take away the responsibility or the challenge, but to empower you with a strength that doesn't originate from you. This isn't just about religion. It's about design. Human beings were not created to function in isolation. We were not built to be endlessly self-sufficient. The breath in our lungs is not ours to control. The beat in our chest is not something we command. We are dependent by nature, but we've convinced ourselves that dependence is dangerous. We've glorified independence to the point that we feel ashamed when we reach the end of our rope. But reaching the end of ourselves is often the beginning of something far greater. It's the starting point of divine strength, the moment where our striving finally gives way to surrender. And in that surrender, there is peace. There is clarity. There is energy we didn't know we had, not because we dug deeper, but because we drew from a source beyond ourselves. The irony is that surrender requires more courage than striving. Anyone can keep fighting blindly. Anyone can keep going out of fear. But to stop, to trust, to release control, that takes faith. That takes insight. That takes a different kind of strength, the kind that's not measured by effort, but by alignment. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to carry it all. You were never asked to. And the moment you embrace that truth, you begin to understand what strength really looks like. It's not in your hands. It's in your willingness to open them. Weariness is something we've all felt, but not something we like to talk about. We live in a culture that teaches us to keep moving, to power through, to silence our fatigue with noise, distraction, and productivity. We're told to keep smiling, to stay focused, to always be on. And so we learn to ignore the signs. We convince ourselves that tiredness is something we can overcome with willpower, with stronger routines, with better time management. But weariness doesn't just live in the body, it settles in the soul. And when it does, no planner, podcast, or productivity hack can pull it out. The truth is, weariness is not the problem. It's not a flaw or a sign of failure. It's not something to be ashamed of. In fact, weariness is a signal. It's the body, the mind, and the spirit saying something's off. Something needs to change. Something needs to be released. It's easy to dismiss weariness as just a part of a busy life. But when we ignore it, we risk becoming numb, disconnected, and eventually broken. And yet, instead of listening to the signal, we keep stacking more weight on our shoulders. We treat weariness like an enemy when, in reality, it can be an invitation. It's the inner warning light telling you that you've been carrying more than you were meant to. It's the moment that whispers, you weren't built to do this alone. But rather than pause, we push harder. We try to prove we're fine. We act as though rest is laziness, that needing help is weakness. We deny the soul its healing because we're afraid of being seen as fragile. But ignoring weariness doesn't make it go away. It buries it deeper until it becomes part of how we live. There is wisdom in stopping. There is clarity in listening to the quiet voice that says enough. That voice is not weakness. That voice is grace. We weren't created to be machines. We were created to live in relationship with God, to draw strength from His Spirit, to be guided, refreshed, and renewed. When we ignore that design, we burn out, but when we honor it, something shifts. We begin to see weariness for what it truly is. Not a shameful failure, but a sacred invitation to surrender. Some people think that if they admit they're tired, they're letting others down. That stepping back means they've lost their edge or their value. But the opposite is true. It takes more strength to admit your limits than to pretend you have none. It takes more wisdom to stop and recalibrate than to keep running on empty. We are not measured by how much we endure silently, but by how well we respond to the signals within us. There's a moment that comes when weariness becomes too loud to ignore. You wake up with a heaviness that doesn't fade. The joy you once felt in your work, your relationships, your faith, it's harder to find. That moment isn't your breaking point. It's your turning point. It's the moment to ask, what am I carrying that I was never meant to carry? What expectations, what fears, what burdens have I taken on alone? The Holy Spirit is not a distant force, waiting for us to earn His help. He's present in those moments of exhaustion, ready to take what we cannot, but He doesn't intrude. He waits for permission, for invitation, for trust. When we recognize our weariness as a signal, we create space for Him to step in. We create room for grace to move. We begin to see that being tired isn't a flaw. It's a reminder, a holy one that tells us we're loved even in our limits. We live in a culture that glorifies self-reliance. From a young age, we're taught to be independent, to stand on our own 2 feet, to be strong enough to handle whatever life throws our way. And so we internalize the message, it's up to me. I have to figure this out. I have to be enough. And for a while, that mindset seems to work. We push through hard days. We hustle to meet expectations. We carry the weight of our families, our careers, our identities. We become fighters, constantly in survival mode, convinced that if we just fight hard enough, everything will work out. But over time, that kind of striving starts to wear us down. The battles get heavier. The problems get more complicated. The pressure becomes suffocating. And in the quiet moments, when no one else is watching, we start to feel it. The exhaustion, the fear, the realization that maybe we can't keep this up much longer. That's when the truth becomes unavoidable. We were never meant to fight these battles alone. The Holy Spirit was given not as an accessory to our lives, but as the very presence of God who dwells within us, strengthens us, and goes before us. He is not passive, He is not distant, He is active, present, and powerful, but we often leave Him on the sidelines not because He isn't willing to help, but because we haven't invited Him into the fight. We're too used to being in control, too used to thinking that spiritual help is something we turn to only when we've exhausted all our own efforts. There's a deep irony in the way we live. We claim to believe in the power of the Spirit, yet we rarely rely on Him when the pressure hits. We treat Him like a backup plan, but He was never meant to be a last resort. He was meant to be the first response. The Holy Spirit is not a safety net, He's the front line. And when we shift from fighting for ourselves to allowing Him to fight for us, everything changes. This doesn't mean we stop showing up. It doesn't mean we sit back and watch life unfold passively. It means we stop carrying the burden of outcomes. It means we stop believing the lie that it's all up to us. It means we step into the situation not with anxiety, but with confidence, because we know who is with us and who is fighting on our behalf. There are battles we're facing right now that we were never equipped to win in our own strength. Emotional battles, relational battles, spiritual battles, the kind that drain us even when nothing visible is happening. We try to reason our way through them. We try to outwork the fear, outthink the uncertainty, outperform the pressure. But the Spirit doesn't work through performance. He works through surrender, and He fights in ways we can't. He brings peace to anxiety, wisdom to confusion, strength to weariness. He does what we cannot do. The moment we stop striving to win alone and begin to trust the Spirit to fight for us, we align ourselves with divine strength. We begin to walk not in fear, but in faith, not in burnout, but in balance, not in panic, but in peace. But that requires letting go of pride. It means admitting we need help. It means trading our self-sufficiency for something far greater. The invitation isn't to stop fighting altogether, it's to stop fighting alone. This isn't weakness, it's wisdom, and it's in that wisdom that we discover a new kind of strength, one that doesn't rise from pressure, but from presence. We've been conditioned to believe that control is power, that if we can plan enough, predict enough, prepare enough, then we can avoid pain, avoid loss, avoid failure. We hold tightly to routines, to outcomes, to timelines. We want certainty. We want answers. We want to know how everything will unfold before we take a step. And so, without even realizing it, we start placing our faith not in the presence of God, but in the illusion of control. We measure our peace by how much we can manage. We base our confidence on how well we can orchestrate life. But the moment life deviates from our plans, as it always does, we begin to unravel. Control, at its core, is rooted in fear. It's the fear of the unknown, the fear of being vulnerable, the fear of being disappointed. And faith, real faith, invites us to step directly into that unknown. It asks us to release our grip, to lean into a story we can't fully see, and to trust the author we can't fully understand. That kind of trust doesn't come easily. It's uncomfortable, it's costly, but it's also where peace is found. The mistake we often make is thinking that faith means knowing how things will work out. But faith isn't about certainty of outcomes. Faith is about certainty in presence. It's knowing that even when nothing makes sense, you're not walking through it alone. It's trusting that there's a purpose even in the delay, a design even in the chaos, and a defender even in the silence. That's the kind of faith the Holy Spirit cultivates, not a surface-level optimism, but a deep, anchored trust that God is still in control even when we're not. When we cling to control, we close ourselves off to the work the Spirit wants to do. We limit our vision to what we can understand. We make decisions based on fear instead of freedom. And often we end up carrying burdens we were never meant to carry, trying to hold together a life that was meant to be surrendered. Faith doesn't deny responsibility, it repositions it. It shifts the weight from our shoulders to God's. It moves us from striving to resting, from panic to presence. Letting go of control is not passive. It's an active decision to trust. It's a bold move to say, even though I don't see the whole picture, I choose to believe that God does. It's saying, even though I don't feel strong right now, I choose to believe that I'm not alone. That's where the Holy Spirit meets us. In the middle of the unknown, in the discomfort of release, in the quiet moments when control slips through our fingers and all we have left is trust. The Holy Spirit doesn't promise to give us every detail. He doesn't promise to remove every obstacle or answer every question. But He does promise to walk with us, to guide us, to strengthen us, and to remind us that our story is not dependent on our control. It's rooted in His presence. And His presence is not fragile, it's not conditional, it doesn't waver when life does. When we trade control for faith, we begin to experience a different kind of strength. One that isn't rooted in outcomes, but in connection. One that doesn't need to know what's next to move forward. One that stands firm not because everything is certain, but because someone is faithful. The more we release, the more we receive. The more we let go, the more we grow. The more we trust, the more we rest. Not in our plans, but in His presence. We often measure strength by how much we can endure without breaking. We look up to people who seem unshaken by life, who carry heavy responsibilities, who appear composed even in chaos. We learn to admire those who push through pain and hide their struggles. Over time, we begin to believe that being carried is a sign of weakness, something reserved for the moments we'd rather not admit. We associate strength with standing tall, moving forward, doing it all ourselves. But there is a deeper strength, a quieter one, that often goes unnoticed. The strength that comes from being carried. Being carried isn't about giving up. It's not about avoiding responsibility. It's not about refusing to act. Being carried means acknowledging that we've reached the end of what we can do in our own power and choosing to lean into something greater. It's choosing to admit that we weren't made to do life alone. That admission, for many, feels like failure, but it's actually the beginning of trust. It's the start of surrender, and it opens the door to a strength we could never manufacture on our own. The Holy Spirit doesn't wait for us to be perfect before stepping in. He doesn't require us to have it all figured out. He meets us in the very places we try to hide, in the weariness, the confusion, the uncertainty. He's not looking for performance, He's looking for permission. The moment we release our grip, the moment we say, I can't keep doing this by myself, that's when He begins to lift us, not from a distance, but from within. His strength doesn't just surround us, it inhabits us, and that changes everything. We're not carried because we are weak. We are carried because we are loved. Love always lifts. Love always makes a way. And when that love comes from God, through the presence of the Holy Spirit, it doesn't just lift our burdens. It restores our identity. It reminds us that we are not defined by how much we can carry, but by who carries us. That shift in identity is transformational. It frees us from the pressure to constantly prove ourselves. It releases us from the need to impress or perform. And it brings us back to a place of rest, where we can breathe again, move again, hope again. To be carried is to trust that someone else sees what we cannot, that someone else has the strength we lack, the wisdom we need, the grace we've been longing for. That's not weakness, that's relationship. That's connection. That's the very design of how we were meant to live. The Spirit of God isn't interested in keeping us functioning under pressure. He wants us to live with freedom, to walk in peace, to move with purpose. And to do that, sometimes we need to stop striving and allow ourselves to be held. There are seasons where the only way forward is to stop resisting help, to let the Spirit carry us through what we cannot fix, what we cannot understand, what we cannot escape. That's not a pause in our progress. It is progress. It's how healing begins. It's how clarity returns. It's how we're reminded that our worth was never in our independence, but in our connection to the one who never leaves. We were never meant to navigate life in isolation. We weren't built for endless independence. We were created for communion, for relationship with God, for alignment with His Spirit, for trust that sustains us when strength fails. And the Holy Spirit isn't distant from our struggle. He's not watching from afar. He's present, ready, willing to carry what we can't. And the moment we say yes to that help is the moment we begin to experience a strength that has no limit, a peace that surpasses understanding. There's a moment in every journey where we realize our strength isn't enough. We've pushed, we've endured, we've done everything we know how to do, and still the mountain won't move. We thought we could carry it. We believed that if we just worked harder, prayed longer, stayed stronger, things would shift. But they didn't, and in that place, where effort meets limitation, where our willpower begins to crack, something powerful happens. We face the truth we can't win this by ourselves. It's a sobering moment, and for many it feels like failure. We associate success with self-reliance. We take pride in being able to say, "I handled it." But victory, real, lasting, soul-level victory, doesn't come through human effort alone. It begins when we step aside and let God step in. Not because we've stopped caring, not because we've given up, but because we've realized the fight was never ours to win in our own strength. The Holy Spirit is not a force we summon when things get hard. He is a constant companion, already present, already working, already fighting. But He does not override our will. He waits for us to invite Him into the battle. And often, that invitation doesn't come until we're at the end of ourselves. Until we've tried everything and found it lacking. Until we've worn ourselves out trying to carry something that only He can lift. There's humility in admitting we can't do it alone. It shatters the illusion of control. It breaks the pride we've built around our own abilities, but it also creates space. Space for grace, space for power, space for peace. We were never meant to carry the burden of victory on our own shoulders. That burden belongs to God. And the moment we realize that, we begin to see surrender not as weakness, but as alignment. Victory in the spiritual life isn't about who's the strongest, the smartest, the most disciplined. It's about who's willing to yield, who's willing to admit they're outmatched and ask for help, who's willing to stop fighting alone and start trusting the one who's already overcome. The Holy Spirit doesn't just give us a boost of energy. He gives us a new perspective. He opens our eyes to see that we're not abandoned, we're not stuck, we're not losing, we're being led. Through the fire, through the pressure, through the confusion. By a strength that is infinite, by a power that never fades. We often look at surrender as the end of the fight, but it's really the beginning of victory. Because once we stop trying to prove our strength, we make room for God to show His. Once we release the outcome, we begin to walk in a deeper kind of trust. And in that trust, we find peace that doesn't make sense, courage that isn't from us, and strength we can't explain. That's the work of the Holy Spirit, not just to comfort, but to empower. Not just to help us survive, but to help us overcome. There's something deeply freeing about no longer pretending to have it all together. About no longer pretending we're fine when we're not. About no longer pretending we're strong enough when we're breaking inside. That honesty becomes the starting point for something real. It becomes the space where God moves not around us, but within us. And from that place, we don't just keep going. We walk in power. We face battles knowing we don't face them alone. We let go of the pressure to win by our own effort and trust in a victory that's already been won. The real fight is not about proving ourselves. It's about positioning ourselves. It's about standing not in our own ability, but in the presence of the one who has never lost a battle. And when we do that, we experience a kind of strength that has nothing to do with how hard we push and everything to do with who we trust.